Hello, everybody. So today is going to be chapter 7 in medical terminology. We're going to go over the cardiovascular system as well as the lymphatic system. And these comprise our circulatory system throughout our body. So let me share my screen and we'll look at a few pictures of each of those parts that make up the circulatory system. Before we start talking about words. There we go. Okay, so objective, you can read those on your own. Okay, so here's the introduction to the cardiovascular system. So this is probably a good refresher for everyone. If you can see that on everything that's color coded in red is considered an artery, and everything that's color coded in blue is considered a vein. Now, all of these arteries and veins that we have here are only drawn on one side of the body, but do know that in real life, all of these are present bilaterally on the body. Okay, so this is the pathway between the heart and the periphery and the lungs. So you can see the heart is in the middle. Well, the heart pumps red. We'll follow the red the main artery coming out of the top of the heart. It's an artery. It's full of oxygenated blood. Well, then it goes through the body. Then it breaks into arterioles and then capillaries, which are the smallest size blood vessels we have, and that's where they communicate and integrate with cells in our body. So that's where gas exchange happens. That's where nutrient exchange happens. That's where waste exchange happens in the capillaries. And then the capillaries pick up the deoxygenated blood and the lymph and the fluid that's in the interstitial space and those waste products, and then it's going to take it back up through the body, and it's going to pump it back to the heart, where the heart is then going to recirculate all that blood again. Now, it does make a stop at the lungs along the way, but you'll see that in a minute. This is just a very intricate picture of the inside of the heart. We're not going to be tested on this, but it's very interesting. Okay, what are the functions of the cardiovascular system? Probably don't have to tell you that. Pumps blood, transports oxygen, nutrients, and immune substances, hormones, and other chemicals to and from the organs. So basically transports everything throughout our whole body. Without the cardiovascular system, we couldn't get anything around our body. Every system is dependent on it. Carries waste products away from tissues. Okay, now this is the lymphatic system. So these are not actually blood vessels, but these are lymphatic vessels. So if you don't know what lymph is the fluid that occurs whenever you have swelling. That's lymphatic fluid. That's edema. But lymph is actually just fluid that has seeped out of your arteries and your veins into the interstitial spaces. So it's just fluid that's just sitting out there between the arteries and the veins and the muscles and other tissues in the interstitial space. Well, the lymph vessels reabsorb that extra fluid to put it back into the circulatory system. So you can see that it runs pretty much perpendicular where the arteries and veins go throughout the body. It does have one main duct right around the heart where it dumps its fluid back into the circulatory system. But all of this fluid all of this extra fluid we have that leaks out is a normal process that happens with us every day. It just happens all the time. Now, sometimes people that will have what we call lymphedema, that might happen after a disease or cancer treatment or surgery. That's actually a problem with their lymphatic system, but that's a problem. That's the story for another day, another semester. What are the functions of the lymphatic system? Lymphatic system returns excess fluid from the tissues to the blood, helps to maintain blood and blood volume, filters the lymph, which is the edema and the fluid I was talking about, and it traps and destroys harmful cells. So sometimes that lymph, that fluid that seeps out of our into our interstitial space might be waste products or actually viruses or bacteria. And so that's another place besides the blood that our bodies can trap that. Our immune system can trap those cells. The lymph also generates part of our immune system, so it generates disease-fighting cells. Okay, so this is just going back to blood for a second. So now we're going from lymph back to blood. This is just a quick little composition here where you can see what your blood is made of. If you've ever seen when they take a vial of blood from you, they put it in a centrifuge and they spin it down into its major components, and then it separates. Well, this picture is what it looks like here on your screen when they separate your blood. The erythrocytes on the bottom, the red part, those are your red blood cells. So you can see your blood is actually mostly made out of water and other solutes. There's only a very thin layer there of leukocytes and platelets. So leukocytes are white blood cells that are our immune system. So a lot of our blood is made up of water, which you can see. Okay, so now let's start putting together some words and learning some things. I'm going to adjust my camera here so I feel like I'm looking all better. It's better. I'm cutting off my head. There we go. Much better. Okay, excuse me. Okay, addin. What does addin mean? Well, it always means gland, and it means node when you combine it with the word root lymph. Okay, so just remember for now, addin means gland. Angie always means blood or blood vessel. Artery with an I means artery with a Y. I don't even know why we have that. Cardi means heart. That is not Cardi B's first name. That is short for cardi, heart, cardiac. Electric without the IC means electrical activity or electricity. And we're talking about the electrical activity that is made from the body, from the heart or from the brain. But in this chapter, from the heart. Our heart actually does produce electrical activity. Lymph just always means lymph, and that's the same thing as the edema or the swelling I told you about that seeps out of our blood vessels. Okay, phleb and there's two root words here, phleb and ven. Those mean vein. So then you might understand because it looks almost the same. But phleb, what would you think of that? Think of like a phlebotomist. When you go to get blood drawn at the lab, it's a phlebotomist that takes your blood work. And we also have a phlebotomy class here at PEMA. So you might walk past the window and see them drawing blood sometimes. Splen means spleen. Just took out an E. Thromb. Thromb means blood clot, okay? And thromb means I'm going to tell you there's going to be a few words that mean blood clot. And sometimes the blood clot is named by the place in the body where it's formed, okay? So if a blood clot forms at a place in the body, where it is, if it's still in the same location that it formed in, when we discover it or we're talking about it, then it's called a thrombus or a thrombocyte, where a thrombocyte is a cell that makes a thrombus or a clot. Okay, so just remember that now. Thrombus is a clot that forms, and we're talking about it where it is. Suffixes. Ac, we've had this before, pertaining to. Graft, we've had it, instrument used to record. Megaly, I don't remember, I think we've had this before, but if we haven't, megaly means enlargement, okay? So megaly means enlargement, as in like an organ abnormal enlargement, like a disease or something. We'll have a word with that in a minute. Penia, that means an abnormal reduction in number. So it's like a low number in a count, like on a blood count, or something like that. We'll make a word with that in a minute. Sclerosis, you may think of multiple sclerosis. Sclerosis means hardening. If you think of arteriosclerosis, that's hardening of the arteries. In multiple sclerosis, they have hard little plaques that form on the inside of their brain and disrupt the myelin and eventually the neurons talking to each other. Okay, let's go to some prefixes. Brady. Brady always means slow. Promise we're going to make some words with these in a minute. Brady means slow. Tachy is the opposite. Tachy means fast or rapid. So I'm going to help you with that now. If we're talking about heart rate, we would say bradycardia, meaning slow heart rate. If we said tachycardia, we would mean a rapid heart rate. Okay, arterial just means pertaining to an artery. I already gave you this one, arteriosclerosis, so that means artery and hardening, and osis means condition of, so it's condition of hardening of the artery. Bradycardia, I just gave you that one, that means slow heart, so slow heartbeat. Cardiac, AC just means pertaining to or pertaining of, so pertaining to the heart. Cardiologist, we've had ologists in several chapters. So by now we know it means it's a person that studies something. So in this case, it's a person that studies the heart, cardiologist. Cardiology is studying, the act of studying the heart. Cardiomegaly, okay, so we just had megaly in this unit just a few slides ago. So we know cardio was heart. I think we all know that by now. What was megaly? Megaly means enlargement, an abnormal enlargement. So if you have cardiomegaly, that means you have an enlarged heart. And you might think, well, if I have a large heart, maybe that means I can pump blood more effectively. Well, sorry, I went to the wrong slide. Sorry. Well, that's actually not true. Now, it is true that people that are runners and triathletes, those people that do a lot of cardio activity, and also a lot of weightlifting and in any kind of fitness, your heart is going to be a little bit larger because it is a muscle. And as our hearts get stronger, yeah, we build a little bit of more muscle fibers in our heart. But actual cardiomegaly, when the heart enlarges, and when we say enlarges, it gets abnormally large. It gets to the point where the heart is so big, it has trouble pumping the blood effectively. And so this can be something that can quickly lead to heart failure and death. Okay, this is a picture or a drawing of arteriosclerosis. So this is the artery, the red part, and then they cut away the wall, and you can see the plaque on the inside is cholesterol and fat from all the nice fatty foods we eat. Okay, let's build some more words. Cardiomyopathy. Okay, so we've had myo and we've had pathy. So cardio we had today, that means heart. If you remember myo, what does myo mean? Or means muscle, okay? And I think by now you remember what pathy stands for. So this is cardiomyopathy, heart muscle disease of the heart muscle. Erythrocytopenia. Okay, so we know urethra with an E means red from another chapter. We know cyto is cell, and we had penia today. What was penia? Penia meant abnormal reduction of or reduced number of or decreased number of. So this is red cell decrease or low red blood cells. Hematologist, okay, so we've got heme, We remember heme from before. Heme means blood. An ologist is a person that studies something. So this is a person that studies blood, a hematologist. Hematology is studying blood. Hematoma. Okay, so a hematoma, this actually translate, you might see oma and say it means cancer. It's a blood tumor. And this can be a blood tumor, a tumor made out of blood cells. But it's usually, when we refer to a hematoma, it usually means we refer to like a really large and nasty bruise. Like, and I'm not talking just like a normal everyday bruise. I'm talking like a bruise, like if you take a hard fall down some steps, or you're in a car accident and get hit from the side, and you get hit really hard by the impact, and you have a nasty bruise that's deep and dark and just this big around. That would be what we mostly consider a hematoma. That's just a big collection of blood that's loose. Hemostasis. What does hemostasis mean? Heme is blood. O is a combining vowel, and stasis usually means a condition of, or keeping things level. So hemostasis is the condition of your blood. Intravenous. None of these are new. We've got intra, which means within. Venous, well, that does today. Ven, which means vein, and us, pertaining to. So this means into a vein, pertaining to, into a vein, intravenous. Here's a suture line, somebody that was stitched together, and then you can see the hematoma, which is the bruise around it. Don't know how, I can't tell how big that is from the picture. It looks kind of small based on the jaggedness of the cut and just the stitches, but usually their hematomas are considered much bigger bruises. Here's an intravenous IV line. You've all seen these. We've all had these. Okay, let's talk about leukos. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's put some more words together. So leukocytopenia. So we've got leuko, which means white, cyto, which means cell, and penia, if you remember from today, meant reduced number, abnormal reduced number, or reduction of. So this is reduction of white blood cells, or low white blood cell count. It's no good. Lymphadenitis. Okay, lymphadenitis. Lymph is the fluid that we talked about today that seeps out of your blood, of your vascular system. Aden is a gland. Remember, that was one of our first word roots today. And itis means inflammation of. So this is lymphadenitis, inflammation of one of the lymph glands, or inflammation of a lymph node. We don't actually have, we don't actually have glands that make lymph, but we have lymph nodes that will pick up the lymph and give it additional things to move it along in the system until it dumps into the circulatory system. So this would be lymphadenitis would be sorry, getting my tongue tangled. Inflammation of the lymph node. Lymphadenopathy would be a disease of the lymph node or the lymph system. Lymphoma is a cancer of the lymph nodes or the lymphatic system. And as you can imagine, that spreads pretty fast. Myocardial. We've had cardial today. We know it's heart. What is myo? It means muscle. So this means heart muscle, myocardial. So heart muscle is called myocardial muscle. And we'll make a word with myocardial. We'll make a phrase with myocardial in a minute. Phlebitis, we had phleb today, that means vein. So this is inflammation of a vein. Splenomegaly, these are two new word roots. So we've got splen, which means spleen, and megaly, that means enlargement of. So this is splenomegaly, enlargement of the spleen. A lot of times that can happen after trauma. Okay, I gave you this word earlier, tachycardia. So we know let's start with the base word. Cardia means heart. If you don't remember tachy, it's the opposite of Brady. It's fast heart rate. So tachycardia is a fast heart rate. Tachypnea. Ooh, do you remember what pnea is? That was from a much earlier chapter. Okay, so we've got tachy, which we know from today means fast. Pnea, you don't remember, means breathing. So this is tachypnea, fast breathing or respiration. Thrombocyte. So if you remember from earlier, thromb meant a blood clot that forms somewhere. A cyte we know is a cell. So a thrombocyte is actually one of your platelet cells that actually forms a blood clot. So a thrombocyte is not the blood clot itself, but the actual one of the many cells that make up the blood clot. Thrombocytopenia. Okay, so we know we just had thrombocytes, so we know it has something to do with clotting cells. Pnea, we've had several times, means decreased number or reduction in. So thrombocytopenia means low clotting cell count or low clotting factor, low blood clot factor. Thrombogenic, okay? So think of thromb as thrombus, which means clot. What did genic mean? We've had genic in another chapter before. Sorry, my dogs are barking. Genic means producing. So this means thrombogenic, producing a blood clot. So thrombogenic is a condition or a state of the body that is going to produce a blood clot. Thrombophlebitis, okay? So we've got blood thrombo, we got clot, phleb is vein, and itis is inflammation of. So put these together, so we know we've got a vein and a clot, and something's inflamed. Well, the vein is the only thing that can be inflamed. So this is a vein that has a clot, an inflamed vein that has a clot stuck in it. So the clot got stuck in the vein, and now the vein is getting inflamed, which happens when a clot gets stuck. The veins or the arteries will become inflamed and irritated. Thrombosis. Thrombosis is, you know what that is? This is just pertaining to a thrombus or just the clot itself. So this is just pertaining to the clot. So you might hear deep venous or deep vein thrombosis. That just means the actual clot in the vein. Okay, angiography. So we know graphy is taking a picture or an image of. We had angi today. Angi meant blood vessel. So this is taking a picture of arteries, veins, or blood vessels, either with a camera or through scans. Arteriogram is a picture of the arterial system. Electrocardiogram. This is an ECG, or what's also known as an EKG. An electrocardiogram is when they put the electrical pads on your chest hooked up to wires, and it shows your heart electrical activity on the monitor. And that's whenever you have to have, before surgery, they'll do an ECG. If you're having trouble breathing, they'll do an ECG to make sure it's not a heart attack. If you're having chest pains, they'll always do an ECG. Many different reasons for an ECG. Electrocardiograph is actually the picture that the machine. So you will see this on a screen going the lines up and down, but the machine will also be drawing it on paper too. So the electrocardiograph is the actual picture that is produced by the machine, or the picture that you freeze frame on the screen. Electrocardiography is the art or the act of doing electrocardiograms. A venogram is a picture or image of the venous system. Okay, this is a drawing or what the printout would look like of an electrocardiogram. So all these lines here are the different electrical impulses that our heart makes with each beat. And I had to actually learn how to read these in PT school, and that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I will never, ever, ever, ever forget how hard that was. Here's an arteriogram and a venogram. So what they do when they want to take an image of your veins or your arteries, they actually have to inject you with a certain kind of dye that will be readable on an X-ray or usually a CT or an MRI machine, usually X-ray or CT. A lot of times they'll inject, and they're usually certain radiographic dyes that they inject. And those are very harmless to us, and they just get filtered out by the kidneys within a couple of hours. But they are the only way that you can see the arteries and the veins going through the system. So if you see this picture A, you can see the rib cage. Well, all of those tubes, you can see the right pulmonary artery coming from the heart. That big kind of white blobbish shadow looks kind of like a ghost kind of in front of the spine. That's the heart. The heart's kind of translucent here. You can kind of see through it, but you can see the main pulmonary artery coming off the heart going to the right lungs. And then you can see all those little arteries and arterioles branching off that main artery, and they're going to the different parts of the lungs to pick up oxygen. So that's pretty cool. Same thing on picture B. You can see the femoral vein, the venogram. You see the iliac vein and then the femoral vein going all the way down the leg. Cool stuff. Okay, now let's make some words built from surgical parts. Angioplasty. So remember, angio means blood vessel. Plasty means surgical repair. So this is surgical repair of a blood vessel. Angiography. What did raphy mean? Raphy meant suturing. So this is suturing of a blood vessel. Phlebotomy. Otomy means opening up of something, and phleb is vein. So phlebotomy is actually opening up a vein. And that's what phlebotomists do. They puncture your vein to open it up to take blood. Splenectomy. Spleen and ectomy means surgical excision or removal of the spleen. Okay, now let's make some words not made from word parts. Sorry guys, one's a little bit longer today than I meant, but it's almost over. Anemia. So A or an means without or below, and emia means blood. So this is low blood or without blood. And so we know in medical language, anemia usually means low red blood cells. Aneurysm. An aneurysm is a weak part of an arterial wall that often is at risk for bursting. And that's what happens a lot of times if you hear of a aneurysm that bursts in the brain or an aneurysm in the trunk and the aorta. It's a part of an artery that is weakened either by genetics or by lifestyle or just over time with age. And it's a very weak part of the artery wall that's at high risk for bursting. And that always causes a lot of damage, if not death. You know what blood pressure is. I'm not even going to try to explain that. Cardiac catheterization. That's when they send they open up our artery in your leg and you're asleep during this. When they need to look at the inside they need to take a look at the inside of your heart, either at your valves or the actual cardiac vein or cardiac arteries or any of those structures. So they'll actually open up an artery in your or a vein in your arm or your leg. A lot of times it's the femoral artery, and they'll send a small camera up through your body. And they can see everything. There's a camera on the end of this long metal thin tube, and they can see everything on all these multiple screens. Well, they thread that up slowly up your arteries till it gets to your heart. And then they can drive, and then they can somehow, I don't know how, don't ask me how they do it. I'm not a doctor here, but they can move that little camera around all through the heart safely without interrupting your heart or blood flow. It's so cool, but they can see everything going on in real time. And so they do this a lot of times either prior to surgery or after a heart attack to see what's going on. Maybe they'll do it prior to surgery so they can get a good inside look at the heart so they know what they're dealing with before they actually open the chest. This is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is CPR. Complete blood count is just when you go and get a few vials of blood drawn, and they're just looking at all of your blood levels: glucose, iron, vitamins, platelets, red blood cells, white blood cells, you name it, they're looking at it. Just usually what they get when you go for a physical. Coronary artery bypass graft. This is CABG, which we a lot of times abbreviate as CABG, or we call it a CABG. This is whenever you bypass, whenever one of the coronary arteries or the heart arteries gets clogged with cholesterol or sclerosis, and you actually take a vein or an artery from another part of the body, usually the leg, and you hook it around that artery on the heart to bypass that clogged artery so that the heart can still get blood. And we should see a picture of that in a minute. Coronary artery disease is the disease of the coronary arteries, usually a hardening and narrowing of them. And embolus. An embolus is exactly like a thrombus, except it's traveling, or it is a clot that has traveled to a new location. So a lot of times clots will form as thrombuses in the legs, and then they'll break apart and they'll flow up through the body, and they'll flow either to the lungs or to the heart or to the brain. In that case, when they're there, they're called an embolus. They're a clot that's traveled from another part of the body. Then that's when you can have a pulmonary embolism, where it blocks your blood flow to your lungs. You can have a cardiac embolism, or an embolism that goes to your brain, and that can be a major stroke. This can be a major heart attack, and a pulmonary embolism can make you have basically a brain injury from not getting enough oxygen. So they're all life-threatening, very, very life-threatening. Heart failure is just what it is. So this is a picture of an aortic aneurysm. You can see, if you look at the aorta here, you can see the kidneys, and that main artery going down from the heart down through the body, through the middle of the trunk, is the aorta. Well, that aorta, you can see just below where the kidneys branch off, it's ballooned out. Well, that's an aortic aneurysm. It's not supposed to be wide and bulbous like that. It's supposed to be, if you look at this little bitty picture over here on the side of the slide, it's supposed to be nice and smooth in one shape like that. So that wall of the aorta there is very weak and at risk for bursting. And that would probably lead to death in that person right there. This is what a catheterization looks like through a cardiac catheterization looks like. This is where they're sending the camera all the way from the leg through the femoral artery, all the way up the aorta and into the heart. It's a machine. So this is what a coronary artery bypass graft, or a CABG, looks like. So if you look at where it says blockage in coronary artery, they've got it drawn as like a little circle, and that blood vessel that circle is in is the original coronary artery. Well, you can see that it's colored brown, and it doesn't get a lot of blood flow to it. So it's completely blocked. Well, that bypass graft that you see labeled is a new blood vessel that they took from another part of the body, and they hooked it onto an earlier part of that blocked blood vessel, and then put it straight into the aorta so that the blood flow can continue to the heart. Here's a thrombus or embolus in the brain. A hemorrhage is a rapid flow of blood. We've had that. Hypertension, high blood pressure. Hypotension, low blood pressure. Leukemia, that would be cancer of the white blood cells. Myocardial, we know that's heart muscle. What is infarction? Infarction means death. So this is death of the heart muscle, or myocardial infarction is the medical term for heart attack. Pulse is your distal, where you can feel your heartbeat distally in your body, away from your heart. Sphygmomanometer. Sphygmomanometer is a blood pressure cuff. Just the fancy word. Stethoscope is what you listen to the heart and breathing with. Varicose veins are veins that are weak and leaky and often start to swell up and appear close to the surface of the skin. It can be very painful. A venopuncture is just a puncture of the vein by a phlebotomist. Here's a stethoscope and a sphygmomanometer. Varicose veins. Here's some abbreviations and then we'll be done. Blood pressure, BP, CABG, CABG, coronary artery bypass graft. CAD, coronary artery disease. CBC is complete blood count. CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. EKG or ECG, they both mean the same thing. And don't let that K confuse you, because that K is actually not even in the word. I don't know where they got that from, but it's electrocardiogram. HF means heart failure. IV is intravenous, like an IV line. MI means myocardial infarction or heart attack. And if you want to, you can fill these in on your own because we went a long time today, so I will give you a break. You're welcome. So sorry I went so long today. This was a little bit of a longer chapter than I'm used to doing, but hopefully I can talk a little bit faster on the next one. So if you have any questions, don't forget to email me anytime. And remember to turn in your assignment for this chapter. Thank you.